Hello, and welcome back to the Wisdom of Warhammer channel. And in today's video, I will be going over the dark history of the Dark Angels Legion. I will be covering their time during the Great Crusade before the Lion was found, and I will talk about their time in the Crusade after the Lion was found. Then I will go over what they did during the Horus heresy and finish up with how they were structured as a legion. Like in my previous videos, I do not own the artwork in the video, and all things Warhammer are owned by Games Workshop and Black Library. So with the intro out of the way, let's get the video started, shall we? I would like to start off with a quote to just show what they were created for during the Great Crusade. This quote was said by their first Legion Master, Hector Thrain. Empires, monuments, and legends are built by those who are merely victorious. We were born to kill, not to build. We are not idle long enough to leave monuments, and we leave no work of the enemy intact to spawn legends. We are the first legion, and he that follows in our wake is death. In the beginning of their history, they were made up to be the perfect killers in the Imperium, as they were stark and uncompromising. They were never diplomatic or merciful when they approached an enemy. They would slaughter everything in their path and move on to the next, as they were the embodiments of death. When people judged them for their actions, they didn't come up with excuses. They offered the truth of what they were created for. As the First Legion were kept hidden as much as they could, and all of their greatest battles from Terra all the way to the other parts of the Imperium were kept hidden. The only proof of their deeds was kept in their data vaults and the minds and memories of their warriors, and their other duty was to fight some of the worst threats during the Great Crusade. On Terra, they didn't have a specific recruiting area and accepted recruits from everywhere, and they started fighting in small groups in the Imperial laboratories and were trained by the drill masters of different combat styles. Before they were named the Dark Angels, they were the Uncrowned Princes, which paid homage to their place in the line of battle and their destiny that the Emperor gave them. This title for the first would inspire unity and a little bit of arrogance, and from this it would spur them to be an example for the expanding brotherhoods. Also, in the early years of their combat records, they created hosts. The hosts were specialized groups of Marines that served in the First Legion companies and would not be bound to a company or commander, so think of them as autonomous squads. When the First Legion went out to begin exterminating the enemies of the Imperium, their first battle was right outside the walls of the Imperial Palace, and it was against an army of hired guns and a few remaining Thunder Warriors. Fresh off the battle simulations and apothecary tables, they fought this invading force and were led by Captain General Constantine Valdor. After the battle, the Uncrowned Prince's next campaign was at the Kingdom of Aked against the Great King of Aked and his Ugdu-Hul warriors, which numbered 200,000 versus 10,000 First Legion Marines. After the king was killed by the first Grand Master of the Uncrowned Princes, named Hector Thrain, and his head hung from Thrain's belt, their next major battle at the end of the Unification Wars showed the might of the 9 hosts of the First Legion. It was named the Third Siege of Antioch, and like I said, 9 hosts from different companies and numbering 30 warriors were able to display tactical overlap and push through the defenses of Antioch. When the Uncrowned Princes went to the stars and participated in the solar reclamation, Hector led the legion against a Crave invasion on the moon of Saturn called Enceladus. They used genophage weapons to completely purge the Crave, no matter the cost, and as the exterminators of the Imperium, they were given the deadliest weapons from the Dark Age of technology that no other legion had. They did have detachments of Imperial Guard, but they would just get slaughtered by the monsters that they fought, and if the Imperial Guard survived, they would be killed due to the secret nature of the first. But as time went on and the line was found, Imperial Guardsmen served alongside the Legion, but we will get to that part later in the video. Pretty much, they were in self-imposed exile due to their nature and what they fought, and from this gave them a sense of pride. This pride was a badge that they wore because as the other legions were out in the open and worked with the Imperial Guard and citizens, those legions saw it as an honor. The honor that the uncrowned princes had was that they were the left hand of the Emperor's military as a brutal weapon behind the pageantry of the Imperial military. The Masters of the First Legion were the most effective leaders in extermination due to their training and experience. When the uncrowned princes went to the stars, they did some combat deployments in the Sol system and killed most brutal threats to the Imperium, but they didn't participate in any majority of the campaigns on the planets in the system, as they were tasked by the Emperor to guard the edge of the system for any threats that entered the Sol system. For a decade, the First Legion exterminated threats in the Outer Rim in the system, from frozen moons to lost human outposts, and I assume they brought Pluto back into the Imperium. While they fought in the Outer Rim of the system, the first orders within the Legion started to form. These orders are specialized divisions and are similar to the host, but they have far more members, and while they were in the Outer Rim, they were able to hone their skills in warfare from the threats that they faced. The First Legion returned to the inner worlds of the Sol system, purged of weakness and hardened by the trials that they faced in the dark. There was no celebration of their return and no parades, but the Emperor acknowledged their growth and gave them a spot in the vanguard of the Great Crusade. When the fleets of the Imperium left the Sol system, the First Legion immediately went to work in purging the deadliest threats to the Imperium. The ships that the uncrowned princes had were the best that the Emperor could offer, and they were the last of the Terran-built warships, and some had new Saturnine patterned ships from Mars. But the best ship that they had was the Gloriana-class battleship, the Invincible Reason, which would eventually become the flagship of the line, but the commander at the time was Hector Thrain still. The last gift they were given was the rest of the forbidden weapons from the Dark Age technology that the Emperor had in his vaults. When they were given this vast amount of weapons, they truly became the Angels of Death, and even had more iconography of death. When the other legions tend to bring human colonies into the Imperium, the First Legion were tasked with the same task that they did before they went into the dens and to monsters and slaughtered everything without fear or hesitation. The records for these battles were non-existent in the normal Imperial records, but the First Legion had the records, and one battle against these monsters was an interesting one. On the planet of Bethesda 6, the third chapter, mostly composed of the hosts of stone and iron, fought against a swarm of monsters in the hollowed out mountains and eventually spread to other planets, but the first eliminated them. The next battle zone was in the Osirian cluster, where a massive fleet of the first, led by Thrain, fought against a sentient planet killer that was mechanical and biological and was released by a long-forgotten empire. This horror and its brood were slaughtered in their thousands by the first and are now lost to time, and the records of this war were locked away by the authority of Grandmaster Thrain. With the records of the First Legion being mostly in secrecy, it may seem to those outside the Legion that they were not doing anything, but they were an effective legion. One thing that they created for themselves was the Principia Bellicosa, which was a book that structured how they waged war and could help them refine their skills in war. Those who were knowledgeable and thrived in the ways of the Principia Bellicosa taught it not to his battle brothers but to the rest of the Legion. As the Great Crusade went on and the Primarchs were being found, the First Legion hadn't reunited with theirs, and during their time in the Crusade, they were extremely prideful, and they were still the best at exterminating, but they were stagnant. They were also stubborn during some campaigns, and it would cost them during battles. And during a battle, Grandmaster Thrain was killed in combat, but his remains were recovered, and from his sacrifice, the First was able to win the battle. From Thrain's death, the entire Legion had an inner turmoil and couldn't choose the next Legion Grandmaster, and it was so bad that Malcador had to intervene. Malcador, instead of censuring the Legion, he offered up a candidate himself, and his name was Urien Vendrag, who was a simple warrior who was a former captain of the 14th Company of the 8th Chapter. The other high-ranking uncrowned princes hated the choice, but they eventually came around and liked the new Grand Master. He roused his brothers and stood shoulder to shoulder with them in battle, and he also made glorious stands upon the field of battle, and his new task was to unify the Shattered Legion. He did unify them, and they finally found a worthy opponent after some time, and they were called the Rangda, and they would be the rival for the Legion for some time. Found by the 105th Pioneer Fleet of the 5th Legion on a planet, and they thought the Xenos were only on one planet, but the Rangda had a cluster of war moons in the system. The 5th Legion called for aid, and the entire 1st Legion came to assist their fellow Legion, and they immediately went to work killing the Xenos threat. They slaughtered everything in their path and mounted corpses and obliterated their war moon fleet, led by their war masters and overlords. The number of Imperial forces were 50,000 1st Legion Marines and over 100,000 support troops that were drawn from the Mechanicus and nearby Imperial fleets. Grandmaster Urien ripped the head of the leader off the Rangdang Force and claimed his first trophy as Grand Master, earning more respect from the Legion command. After a few more decades of warfare in the darkest parts against the Xenos foes, and the sad death of Grandmaster Urien Vendrag, the Primarch of the First was found on Caliban. 150 years of the Great Crusade, the Emperor found his son, and a small force of Dark Angels came with him to meet their father. The Lion was the leader of the biggest Night Order on Caliban, and he led them in the extermination of a Chaos Beast on Caliban. He was proud to see his sons, and he learned from everyone under his command, and like his brothers, he restructured the Legion. He put the hosts into one group called the Hexagrammaton, and he reordered the command structure and made it similar to the Night Orders of Caliban. The Blade Masters of Caliban, paired with the Battle Masters of the Dark Angels Legion, created even more effective exterminators. With the discipline, honor, and duty of the Night Orders gave the Legion new purpose in the Imperium. They weren't exterminators who didn't care about anything else, but they cared about safeguarding those who couldn't defend themselves. But it wasn't always like this, because some of the people of Caliban hated it. For instance, some of the Night Order leaders hated that their world would become like the other worlds of the Imperium. Luther was one of those voices who didn't like this choice being brought into the Imperium, but he kept it to himself, building a dark shadow in his mind. While the Lion met with his brothers leading his newly restructured Legion, his brothers saw a new purpose in his brother's Legion, but they saw him as dour and morose. He never cared for the chivalric ideals of Sanguinius, or the arbitrary hatred of Mortarion, or the obsession with beauty of Fulgrim. He only cared for the elimination of the Imperium's enemies, and his sons had the same mindset like their father. They did just that against the Rangda again twice alongside the White Scars and Space Wolves, who slaughtered every Rangda in their way. In between the last campaign against the Rangda, the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves, with both Primarchs leading them against the planet of Dulin. Dulin was already an Imperial world and was rebelled against the Imperium, and the two legions would send a message. Leman Russ was insulted by the planetary governor, and he sent his legions into battle and wanted to claim the head of the governor personally. He started by launching squads of the Marines into the orbital stations, making them crash into the surface, killing a lot of people of Dulin. But even though the Wolf King rushed into combat with his legion at the back, his brother, the Lion, planned his assault and got to the ruler first and killed them. Lehman was angry and punched his brother, and they threw hands for a similar day and night, and at the end, Lehman was knocked out by the Lion. After this battle, there was a new tradition between the two legions where every time they fought alongside each other, they had to pick two champions that dueled like their Primarchs without killing each other. The last campaign that the Dark Angels fought in before the heresy started was the subjugation of Soros. Soros was a human empire that lost contact with the rest of humanity like the other human colonies, and was found by the Lion in the 4th Expeditionary Fleet. Surprisingly, the Khan requested aid from the Lion, and his brother answered because the Lion seemed to like the Khan and appreciated his honesty and forthright nature, even though they had differences. Soros was led by a bureaucracy group called the Sorosi, and wanted to be blended into the Imperium, and they were happy to, but they secretly worshipped chaos. When the Lion met with the leaders, they snuck a nuke aboard the Invincible Reason, which is the flagship of the Lion. While the two parties were talking, Luther and Zahariel, two high-ranking members of the Dark Angels, found the nuke and had a moment of weakness, but were able to launch the nuke into space, causing minimal damage. Hearing and seeing this, the Lion killed the Sorosi group and prepared his legion for planetfall, and he killed everyone on the planet. But after the battle, he ordered some of the legion, including Luther and Zahariel, back to Caliban in exile to train new neophytes. In the final days of the crusade, nearing the beginning of the Horus heresy, Horus and Lorgar weren't able to create a warrior lodge in the First Legion due to the secretive nature of the Line and the Legion. The Line was sent out to the farthest part they could go in the Imperium, but this next campaign would be the first campaign that the Dark Angels fought Astartes. This campaign was called the Thramas Crusade, and it was against the Night Lord's Legion and the Night Haunter himself, and they were tasked with slowing down the Lion and his sons. The location was in the Thramas system, and it lasted 2 years, and it began on the planet of Suguelsa, and the Thramas system was important because it had a number of important forge worlds. The Night Lords did hold them back, but they were butchered within that time because the Dark Angels were better at killing things than torturing things. The two brothers and their legions did meet and talk because Kurz had a message for the Lion from Horus, but they resumed fighting with Kurz, almost killing the Lion, but he was stabbed by Cor Swain, Paladin Captain of the Ninth Order. They continued fighting for some time until the Dark Angels received a distress call from an Iron Hands commander who was fighting a Death Guard assault led by First Captain Typhus. Now when the Legion arrived, they found out that both sides were fighting over a sentient machine called the Chitolcha engine, which had a warp entity inside. Weary of both sides, the Lion took the device for himself, and his Legion found out that it could make accurate warp jumps. This was a big advantage because the warp had been throwing out warp storms that messed with traveling, and this device helped move the Legion to where the Night Lords were. But shortly before that, the Dark Angels began to fight demons, and from this the Lion realized he needed the Librarians, which can help kill these warp beings. After this fight, they found out where the Night Lords were and fought the fleet. In Kurz, with being Kurz, he decided to board his brother's flagship with his entire first company and personal guard, including First Captain Iago Savatarian. This attack failed, and the Night Haunter and some of his men were captured, but Kurz escaped and started playing a game of cat and mouse with the Lion and his crew, which is terrifying. Soon after this, the Dark Angels fleet arrived in the system of Macragge, the capital world of Ultramar, and the homeworld of Rabute Gilliman, thanks to the guidance of the Pharos Beacon. They were greeted by Gilliman and his legion alongside Sanguinius and his legion, who also followed the beacon to Macragge, and they were wary of each other, but they did get over it. They talked about what is next for the Imperium, because they had no communication with Terra and assumed the worst, and from this they started Imperium Secundus, with the Lion as the military leader, and his Dark Angels as his enforcers. The first thing that they had to deal with was with the Night Haunter, who escaped the Invincible Reason and was causing disorder in the poorer parts of Macragge. Both the Lion and Gilman tracked their insane brother and courted him, but almost died. But thankfully the Iron Warrior Warsmith Dantiak pulled both Primarchs to the world of Sotha. As the two Primarchs regrouped with their legions, the Lion got word of Kurz in the system of Zepeth, but this system was under the control of the World Eaters and Word Bearers. After fighting the traitors in the system, the Lion ordered the Dreadwing lieutenant named Feroth Redloss to track down Kurz on the planet of Zepeth. On the planet, the Dark Angel's force was horrified to see the dark rituals that the Word Bearers were doing, so they made sure to destroy this corruption. They were not able to find the Primarch of the Night Lords, and from this they continued the hunt for him, but the Lion wanted to spread his forces around to deal with other threats. He ordered Paladin Captain Corswain to track down and kill the first Captain Typhus and ordered a detachment of Dark Angels under the command of Captain Ormond to assist the Space Wolves against the Alpha Legion in the Alaxix Nebula. Due to the chaos Kurz was causing on Macragge, the Lion knew his brother was in the Illyrium region of Macragge, which rebelled against the Imperium. The Primarch of the First suggested that he could bombard that region and kill the Night Haunter without any casualties to the forces of the Imperium. But due to the stupid idea and the tense relationship that Gilman and the Lion had due to different ideals, the bombardment was scrapped. Instead, the Lion declared martial law and used the Dreadwing to flush out the Night Haunter and kill the rebels, and it worked because the Night Haunter was found by the Lion and they fought. And thankfully the Lion was able to subdue his brother. He asked Kurz why he betrayed the Emperor, and he responded with why not, and not wanting to kill a brother, he knocked out his insane brother and then ripped his backpack off his armor and broke the spine of the Night Haunter. He brought Conrad in chains to his brothers for judgment, and as the trial went on, the Night Haunter was talking about the terrible things the Lion and the Dark Angels did during their hunt for Kurz before he was captured. Hearing the things that the Lion did made Gilman mad to a point where he took his brother's sword and broke it over his knee, and from this, Sanguinius and Gilman banished the Lion and his sons from Ultramar. When the Dark Angels were going to leave, the Lion remembered hearing that Kurz said he wasn't supposed to die here, but he was to be killed by the Emperor's assassin. When the Lion realized this, he told his brothers about what Conrad said, and then they gathered their legions for war, and Imperium Secundus was abolished. The first place they went was Davin, and by this time, the traitors started to use the powers of chaos to transform it. Sanguinius, hoping to use the prophetic powers of Conrad, went down to Davin to find a way to help the Emperor and the Imperium, but the Lion had other thoughts. He wanted to destroy the planet and was about to fire upon his brother who was on the planet after Sanguinius knocked out the guards and took Kurz from his cell on the flagship of the Lion. But the Lion realized that he had lost himself and confessed to his brother Gilman to not become like him, being blind to reason, and he ordered a drop-pot assault on Davin. Close to the end of the battle, the Lion and Gilman held the traitors back, while Sanguinius and the Blood Angels rushed to Terra, and then the two brothers split to draw off the traitors. Now, in another part of the galaxy, Paladin Captain Corswain's task force of Dark Angels had been hunting down the first captain of the Death Guard named Typhus, and the hunt was going well, but he lost him for a time. But he changed course by heading to Terra with his force of Caliban Dark Angels that broke exile in his task force. Corswain arrived at Terra with a force of 10,000 Dark Angels to support the Loyalists and were tasked with guarding the Astronomicon against the Neverborn and the traitors. As they held the mountain that held the Astronomicon, Typhus arrived to fight them alongside waves of the Death Guard force while the world shifted around them. Going back to the other part of the Dark Angels Legion that the Lion was leading, and the first thing that happened was that the Lion became nihilistic after the Astronomicon went dark. So as the Lion bathed in nihilism, he ordered his Dark Angels force to go on a path of destruction of the traitor Primarch's homeworld instead of making his way to Terra. He He was able to destroy Chemos and Barbarus, and the Dark Angel's fleet arrived at Deliverance, the homeworld of Horus Corax, and found out that the Wolf King was there with most of his wounded legion. After the three brothers talked, the Space Wolves would join in the crusade of vengeance that the Dark Angels were going through alongside a contingent of Raven Guard. Eventually they arrived at Terra, but they weren't able to do anything in the fight because Horus was dead, and then the Emperor was crippled and entombed on the Golden Throne. The Dark Angels fleet that got there alongside the line did butcher all the traitors they could find without mercy, and after some time, they returned to Caliban to finally rest after years of fighting dark forces. Sadly, this didn't happen because the beings of the warp corrupted the leaders of the Calibanite Dark Angels, including Luther. They manipulated the new Dark Angel recruits to fire upon the returning Dark Angels, and from this they became the Fallen. Caliban was destroyed by a warp storm and had thrown the Fallen into the future. Luther went insane and was rambling about how the line was taken by the Watchers in the Dark after Luther fought the line and regretted what he did. Now the Dark Angel's history for the next 10,000 years would be one of paranoia and being untrustworthy, but I will go over that history in another video. Now that I've gone over the history of the Dark Angels during the Great Crusade and Horus heresy, I will go over the structure of the Dark Angel Legion and what the orders and hosts are called and what they do. Starting off with the orders of the Hekatinska, which is translated as the 100 esoteric arts in the forbidden language of the ancient land of Mycenae. These groups of Dark Angels were secret groups that were embedded in the wings and chapters of the Legion. They were autonomous squads of both warriors and scholars who guarded certain lore and weapons that a majority of the Legion wasn't allowed to know. They were also headhunters of certain Xenos races that they fought because they needed to be the best exterminators that they could be. They would not be in massive groups, but they were in smaller cells that advised the commanders of the Dark Angels Legion before and during battles, and these units that formed called Sinobum. But when the line was found, the order system was restructured, making them more effective, and he combined the order system with the wings, creating the Hexagrammaton. Now going into the wings and what they do, we have the Deathwing Protocol, which are the Terminators who serve as the Primax personnel guard during combat deployments. They also serve as the heavy infantry of the Dark Angels Legion and would be the frontline troops that gun down hordes of beasts and could serve as headhunters as well. The next wing is called the Raven Wing Protocol, and they are the fast-moving bikers that are used for search and destroy tactics and hit and run tactics. The Dreadwing Protocol was the worst wing of the Dark Angels because they used the most sinister weapons that the Dark Angels had in their vaults that predated the Age of Strife. The only time they were allowed to be activated was by the Lion and a voted lieutenant and the Dark Angel who would lead the Dreadwing's destroyer squads. They used Phosphex, Rad, and Vortex weapons and also used massive armored assaults with the uses of Mastodons, Spartan assault tanks, Land Raiders, and Fellblades, but these vehicles were equipped with better weapons. The Firewing Protocol were the most relentless exterminators and did wars of wills against the Emperor's foes, seeking to break their foes' resolve through the slaughtering of their ranks. The Ironwing Protocol was the armored companies of the Dark Angels who crushed all in their way, with Randlaters, Dreadnoughts being at the front gunning down anything in their way. The last wing in the Hexagrammaton is called the Storm Wing, and they are the majority of the Dark Angels Legion as the Swiss Army knife of the Legion. Another part of the Storm Wing consists of breacher squads and assault squads that carry boarding shields, and they mostly do boarding actions against foe ships. Now, going back over the wings, they all have the same task. They are effective exterminators, but they all have different tactics of extermination. And now that is the history and what the wings and orders of the Dark Angels are. But now we have gotten to the end of the video on the history and structure of the Dark Angels Legion. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, hit the like button. If you know someone who liked this content, share it with them. And if you are new and would like to see more content, hit the subscribe button and bell notification to be notified for when a new video comes out. In the next video, I'll be going over the history of the Emperor's Children during the Great Crusade and Horus heresy, as well as their structure. I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next video. This is Wisdom Warhammer, signing off.